Thank you so much for that great introduction. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Good? All right. We had such a fun time last night. It was a great party. So thank you to Heather for putting that together. It was kind of amazing to be able to spend a little bit of time with some of you and get to hear your stories and all the amazing things that you're doing. And I think that's a pretty big habit when we come to an event like this, is to tell everyone all the amazing things that we are doing, right? And talk about all the good stuff. And so I thought I would start off this morning by telling you the time when I was not doing so well, when things were not going good for me, and how I kind of came out of it. In fact, I remember coming home. It was quite late. I put my bag down, I plopped on the couch, and my limbs felt like lead. And my head was spinning. And I thought to myself, I can't believe this is happening again. I was going to quit. I was going to give up. See, I built my company and I hired great people, and yet I felt like every single day I'm just swimming in this ocean of problems. You probably know some of these problems. You're in these meetings all day long that don't seem to go anywhere, or you're fixing things that should never have been broken to begin with. Or maybe you're just exhausted at the end of the day and you have nothing left for yourself, let alone your family. That's where I was. That was what I was dealing with. And then it's 2008 and the Great Recession happens. So things went from bad to worse. In my infinite wisdom, I had decided that we were going to double down on mortgage companies as our number one vertical. They were great for business because they were hiring a lot of people until they were all of a sudden not in business anymore. And I lost 40% of my clients. I lost 40% of my receivables like that. And so I got my senior team together and we were trying to figure out what to do and how we were going to solve this. And we didn't come up with anything. And so I got all of the leaders and all of the managers together. And again, we had this conversation and nothing's coming out. Nothing is like just jumping out at me like, how can we save the company? How can we get through this? And so I got everyone together. And now I'm telling everyone what's at stake and what's happening. And I'm staring at thousands of faces who are kind of just blankly looking at me. And now I'm pissed. Do they not get it? Are they lazy? Are they passive aggressive? Are they stupid? How come nobody has a great idea? How come no one is doing this? And so I spent the next 2 or 3 days just brooding and being, probably the worst person to be around. And I'm walking down the hall in our office and I catch my reflection in a mirror. And I turned back around and I looked at myself, thinking I was going to give myself a pep talk or something. And I suddenly had this realization. It wasn't my employees. It wasn't the market. I was the problem. I had created this culture where I'm the idea guy. I'm the one who solves the problems. I show up with knight in shining armor and I'm going to tell you what to do. And all my people did was just execute. That was my fault. So I knew that we had to build an amazing culture. And so we started to do that. I built this culture, we changed it. Everything I did every single day was about making the culture better, their lives easier, their work easier, and to make sure that they felt like they could bring their ideas, they could bring their creativity, they could bring their best selves to work, and we were actually going to listen. And so out of that, I started to enjoy work again. I stopped firefighting. I could breathe. And my people stepped up. They filled their roles and they started doing this amazing work because I stopped doing the thinking for them. Now, before I figured out exactly what to do to make that culture great, I had to kind of sift through a million opinions and thousands of books and theories, right? But I ultimately had to figure out where to focus. Because if you don't know where to focus, or even worse, you try to focus on everything, which I think we're probably dealing with a little bit right now with AI, you're going to lose. And I got this lesson very poignantly at 30,000 feet when I'm sitting on an airplane with my wife and I look out the window and I turn back to her and I say, I think something's really wrong. Now, we had gotten on this flight, and when we got on, everything seemed fairly normal. Now, it's an Aeroflot flight. I don't know if anyone's ever flown Aeroflot, but it makes Spirit Airlines seem like a luxury. And we got on, everything kind of seemed normal. There was a mangy dog running up and down the aisles. That's weird. There was sitting next to me the most stereotypical Russian woman with the little balaclava thing tied around her, and the kind of couple nose hairs. She's sitting next to me. Now, the reason we were on this flight going to Russia, our 5th time going to Russia, is because we're going to go adopt our daughter. Now, the year prior to that, we had decided to adopt one child. It was supposed to be one girl, and it turned out we ended up adopting one boy. Oh, but wait a minute. As soon as we said yes to adopting him, magically he had a brother. And so we ended up adopting 2. So we were supposed to have one girl. We ended up with 2 boys. And then, so we brought them home in June, and by November, they had come to us with some toys, and they said, we really would like to send these to our friends at the orphanage. Can we do that? And of course, our hearts melt, and we're like, of course we can do that. And I go online to try to figure out how do I mail, a bunch of toys in a box to Russia. And it's so expensive. I say the most expensive words I've ever said. Oh, for that price, we could fly there. Oh. So we flew there just after Christmas, left their toys behind, bought new ones when we got there, and we went to the orphanage, and they got to see their friends again, and we brought them toys and a new bicycle, and it was great. What wasn't great was when I turned and looked and saw my wife braiding this little girl's hair. There's number 3. So we got in the car, and we hadn't even said a word to each other, and my son turns to us and said, so are we going to adopt Luba or what? Yes, we are. So we came home, we figured out how to do it. So we went from 0 kids to 3 kids in 11 months. Right? We don't do anything slow at my house, right? Just go big or go home. So 9.5, 8, and 4.5. I thought I was going to skip diapers, and then my daughter gave us a grandson, so I had to do diapers. I didn't get to skip that fun. But so we're on this plane, and we're supposed to go and get her. We're supposed to be at court. And we're on this plane, and something's not right. Something's not happening correctly. And I noticed, because I'm kind of a nerd, I kind of follow the flight patterns, and I know which way we're supposed to go. We're supposed to kind of go up over Toronto, and I know the little arc, on the screen, except there's no screens in the Aeroflot flight, by the way. It's 12 hours of staring at a piece of cloth in front of you. And the plane is lunging a little bit. It's not acting correctly. And we're going up to San Francisco and back down to LA, and up to San Francisco and back down to LA. And then I noticed that there's liquid coming out of the wings. That's when I turned to my wife and told her I thought there was something wrong. And we figured out what it was fuel. And so this gets around the plane. People start talking, right? That we're dumping fuel, and what's happening. At this point, the stewardesses are gone. There was nobody official anywhere. There must have been like a trap door that they knew where to get into, because no one is around. And now the plane is getting, back in the day, we used to have these things for young kids called Palm Pilots and Blackberries. Everyone had their little devices out, and we were all on them, because forget the rules. There are no rules anymore, trying to communicate to people, right, when you could maybe get a signal up there. And now there's this discussion happening in the plane about how bad it is that we are dumping fuel in the ocean, that we are hurting the fish. People's anger and people's frustrations and their anxieties found a home, and it was the fish. And so finally, I go and I start to stand up. And this is the moment when my wife grabs my arm as hard as she's ever grabbed it and tried to pull me back down and says, "You're not in charge." What was really interesting about leadership is if you just try, if you just stand up and you say something, people will listen. They will respect the fact that you're trying to help. And often, many times, leaders just sink back and wait for the dust to settle. So I stood up and I said, listen, and immediately the plane got quiet. It's crazy. I don't know anything. I'm not the pilot. And I started to try to calm people down. And then all of a sudden, the pilot finally comes on. Okay, and sit back down. He talks, I swear to God, for 10 minutes in Russian. I only know like a few baby Russian words. I have no idea what he said. Anyone who did understand him didn't tell the rest of us, and they all stood there, sat there very stoically. And then he finally came back on. Now we're going to get the version in English, right? And he goes, we go back to LAX. Okay. And again, the plane erupts in confusion and everything. So I stand back up again and I say, listen, we have to dump the fuel. And there is this wave of disagreement and argument and people saying, but the fish and we're polluting and it's not good and we shouldn't be doing this. And I said, we have enough fuel to go 12 hours. If we don't dump the fuel, we're going to die. And again, the plane got very, very quiet. And that little old lady who was sitting next to me stood up. Everyone's looking at her. And she looked around, you could hear just a pin drop. And she looked back at me and she said, forget the fish. Except she didn't say forget. Very good. She got it, right? There's a list of priorities here. We need to survive.